I never thought my quiet suburban life would erupt into something you'd half expect to see on daytime TV, but there I was standing in my front yard, coffee gone cold in my hand, watching Karen, our HOA president, throw a rock at my brother's brand new truck like she was auditioning for a revenge movie. I mean, who does that, throws a rock at someone's vehicle in broad daylight and then stands there like she's earned a medal? It felt ridiculous and terrifying all at once, like watching a slow-motion car crash while someone handed out commentary. We'd lived in that little cul-de-sac for 5 years, and it was by any reasonable measure peaceful, quiet mornings. A community pool that didn't require a reservation. Neighbors who borrowed sugar and returned it with a smile. Then Karen got elected, and the neighborhood's rhythm changed. She had a haircut you could set your watch to and a stare that could curdle milk, and the moment she climbed into that golf cart with a clipboard, she turned into this odd, bureaucratic zealot. Small rules blown up into public theater. It started tiny a note about my trash can being visible for exactly 10 minutes too long, a fine for a lone dandelion brazen enough to bloom near my mailbox. I paid the fines pulled. The weed tried to keep my head down because you learn quick around here that making enemies over a dandelion is in fact exhausting. But she seemed to thrive on policing the trivial, patrolling the streets like a tiny monarch, eager to crown themselves with the slightest infraction. People whispered about her at barbecues, but nobody wanted to be the person who stood up first. The real trouble began when my brother Mark came to visit. Mark's the kind of man you can rely on, steady, patient, a prosecutor by trade, someone who saves his thunder for moments that actually deserve it. He'd been saving for that gleaming black pickup for years. He loves it in a quiet, stupid way, polishing it until his reflection winks back at him. My driveway was full that weekend, so he parked on the street, well clear of driveways and hydrants, perfectly legal, and I didn't think twice about it. The next morning, I heard the commotion before I saw it. The high-pitched calls, neighbors gathering like gulls, and when I peered through the blinds, there was Karen, clipboard at the ready, standing next to Mark's truck, pointing and gesturing like she'd discovered a moral failing. I stepped outside. Heart pounding. People always say your pulse does weird things before a fight, and ask Karen what's going on. She turned eyes bright with that self-satisfied glow and declared that Mark's truck violated some bylaw in her book because it could be used commercially, and therefore it was by her reasoning a commercial vehicle and must go. Mark laughed soft, like he thought the whole thing was small and silly. "I'm visiting my sister. It's my truck," he said, and Karen decided that made no difference. The tow driver shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. Nobody wants to be in the middle of neighborhood drama, especially when a woman with a clipboard looks like she knows more paperwork than the DMV. Then Karen did the thing none of us expected, none of us who'd been swallowing little humiliations for months. She marched to a pile of landscaping rocks, lifted one like a tiny scepter, and launched it at Mark's driver's side door. The sound when it hit, the gutting crunch, the paint that folded like an injury, stuck with me. A collective gasp rolled through the small crowd. Mark's face went from amused to cold in a blink. You could see the muscles around his jaw tighten like steel. I lost it. "Karen, are you insane?" I barked, angry and absurdly protective all at once. She sneered as if she'd scored some moral victory, telling us to call the police because she'd caught an illegal parking, and by golly, she would see justice done. It was theater-level entitlement. Mark moved slow. He's not the shouty type, and pulled out his phone, but not to dial 911. He scrolled through his contacts with that measured calm. Prosecutors have the kind of calm that trusts procedure more than fury. Then very quietly he said, "You don't have the right to vandalize my property." He didn't shout it. He didn't need to. His voice was low and measured, and the words landed harder than any raised voice could. Then he said something I'll never forget. "I accept your apology." He wasn't speaking to Karen, he said it to the tow driver. The implication was surgical. This isn't a matter for a quick tow and a tip. This is now a documented incident with witnesses and a prosecutor in attendance. The tow driver, likely sensing the legal heat about to rain down, hopped back into his cab and pulled off like he'd seen an oncoming storm. Neighbors who'd been biting their tongues started chuckling, first quiet, then louder, and the sound was like a small tide washing through the street. Karen's expression curdled in front of us. The smugness drained away, replaced by a pale, panicked animal look. She stammered, tried to call it a misunderstanding, offered to pay cash right then and there, begged us to see reason any version you could imagine of a person on the edge of being exposed. But she'd already shown her true colors in front of witnesses, and that's hard to unsee. Mark, with a patience that was almost cruel in its steadiness, told her to send the bill to my house and to resign as HOA president. He let the hint of legal follow-through hang in the air, civil options, misuse of authority, the possibility of looking closely at every enforcement action she'd taken, and it did what quiet threats do best. It made the battlefield uncomfortable for the bully. The next day, a short resignation letter slipped under everyone's door. Personal reasons, the polite lie, and a check for the repairs landed at Mark's house not long after, sizable enough that he took the truck straight to the shop. A new, more reasonable neighbor took the HOA helm, and over the following weeks, peace threaded itself back through our block. Karen stopped her patrols, stopped waving her clipboard like a tiny scepter, and began avoiding eye contact like someone who's been caught with their hand in the cookie jar. Mark still parks in the same spot when he visits his truck, a quiet, gleaming reminder that petty tyrants can be toppled with something as mundane as witnesses and the right kind of presence. But the story's real sting isn't the dent or the resignation letter. It's the lesson that stuck with me long after the truck was fixed. It's easy to picture this as a tidy karma story. Bully gets caught, bully leaves, all is right. But the uncomfortable truth is that rules, law, and authority are neutral tools. In the hands of someone decent, they keep things livable. In the hands of someone hungry for control, they become instruments of harassment. I realized watching Karen's little regime crumble, that the person who appears harmless, the one with the tidy haircut and the clipboard, can do more harm than a loud antagonist because they weaponize the language of order against neighbors. That realization didn't feel satisfying so much as sharp, like an awareness that made me look sideways at how we all defer to rules instead of people. The better ending wasn't merely that Karen left or that Mark's truck was repaired. The real fix was how neighbors started to talk again, not in whispers at the fence, but over coffee and in the mailbox aisle. Folks who'd been too afraid to fuss about a weed or a mailbox started to say, "Hey, that's not okay." And it made small kindnesses easier. That's the kind of justice that doesn't make headlines a neighborhood learning to hold a standard without making it a cudgel. So yeah, Mark got his truck fixed, and he parks it the same way every time he visits, a little ritual that makes us smile. We elected someone who greets people by name and uses the bylaws for guidance instead of as a club. And I learned a nagging, useful thing: rules are only as good as the people who enforce them, and civility is not the same as silence. Don't let the fear of being difficult keep you from standing up when something's wrong. Now tell me, what would you have done standing there in that crowd? Would you have stepped forward sooner or cheered from the porch? Do you think it's fair to bring someone in a position of authority from your family to bear on a neighborhood problem, or does that cross a line? Drop your take, share a story, if you've stared down a clipboard-wielding Karen of your own. And let's argue a little, because these are the conversations that actually fix things.